Okay, one mind, one world for us all. This is Attican. Welcome to another episode of the Epstein Files. We are going to continue where we left off yesterday. I am in the midst of reading a very long prose narrative written by Virginia Roberts about her times being trafficked, not only by Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell, but also a one Ron and Charlie, which were actually the first people to traffic her. And where we left off last night was they were all together, they being Jeffrey, Glenn, Virginia, and I think it was Emmy too. They all went scuba diving in the Caribbean near Little St. James, and they almost got attacked by sharks. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And I will pick up on chapter 11. So without further ado, let me just get my windows right over here so I don't have to adjust them later. Okay, so chapter 11. Let me zoom in a little bit. Oh my gosh. I don't know why Scribd always does this. And if anybody has seen the Beirut explosion, or hasn't seen it yet, excuse me, I uploaded that as well to my my channel. I just got a wireless keyboard, but I unplugged it. Okay. Throughout the remainder of the quickly passing year, I was on a constant move with Jeffrey, attending various dinner parties, mostly with other esteemed billionaires and widely acclaimed scientists. Jeffrey likes to surround himself with the most brilliant and powerful of minds, filling his little black book with some of the most esteemed and even infamous people in today's wealthy society. It was during those intellectual gatherings that my body was also put on the banquet menu, but this time for a powerful Senator George Mitchell, and another prominent Nobel Prize winning scientist whose name would be mentioned, but for all the life of me can no longer remember. Wow. They would be the only some of the recognizable figures of the high society that became added to my list of clientele. Of course, being introduced to for a lot more than just a client of massage. As an amusement to Jeffrey's associates, I also knew my place was to entertain, but not to every desired content. Was to show them a good time, but not the way I would have to use technique and effort for Jeffrey. The very teachings from Jeffrey himself, or my tutor, as he liked to so eloquently put it, consistently being used and adored for the likeliness of my youthful looks. I was becoming very accustomed to my lifestyle with Jeffrey. Never really relaxing into it, but just accepting this as being as good as it will ever get for me. I didn't think I should be complaining. Wasn't I being offered a life in exchange for servitude? Just letting the sign of my anxiety and depression pass me by while I blanketed them with my pills, suffocating under a blanket of pain, is all I was really doing. I spent Christmas and the New Year's holidays with Jeffrey in New York City, who doesn't celebrate the occasion, as he is of Jewish descent. Not that he was a religious man anyways, I never even saw him celebrate Hanukkah either. We firstly stayed at his ranch in Santa Fe for a week, then left for a long plane trip to Paris, France, where we all suffered jet lag for the next 24 hours. We all stayed in a grand hotel with a view, the Champs-Élysées. Emmy and I shared a room, and her gifted ability to make new contacts in just a few hours. She brought out a J to share on the rooftop at nighttime while we were overlooking the lit-up Eiffel Tower. We never got really close as buddies, but we both knew that we were indebted to and felt each other's sorrows. All four of us went out to shopping at Chanel, D&G, Ralph Lauren, and many other little exclusive boutiques the following afternoon. As a gift, Jeffrey bought me a white terry-clothed, goose-feathered sofa and had it sent back to my apartment in Florida, and bought some new tapestries to have sent back to Santa Fe for his ranch. We also visited his up-and-coming Paris apartment. It was a modern, typical flat being refurbished, and we went to see how it was all looking. Jeffrey liked to fuss about every detail and harass the builders about their work, changing last-minute details at a whim. Days and many croissants later, we left for Spain, feeling bloated and sleepy. We only stayed in Spain for the afternoon, going to see another astounding Moroccan castle for Jeffrey to replicate at one of his many mansions. It was only a short plane ride to Tangiers, Africa, for more castle hopping. We arrived at the historic landmark and the only 5-star hotel in Tangier, called El Minza, in the village of Ville Nouvelle. The city and outskirts were still very hostile at the time, females being warned to not walk the streets alone and not to leave the house after dark, or be at risk of being raped or worse. When we got to the room, it was oozing with every expected bit of extravagance that a luxurious historical palace should offer, until I was greeted with a pile of monkey poo in the very middle of my bed. Not a happy camper. I called Jeffrey, Ghislaine, and Emmy into my adjoining room, and they all had quite a good laugh at my expense. Within a moment's notice of a complaint call to the front desk, we had an attendant cleaning up my bed linen. The cleaner noticed the window was still open. He warned not to leave it ajar at nighttime, just in case another monkey wanted to make himself comfortable in my quarters. Ghislaine joked that maybe I should keep it open. I might find a suitable husband before I get any older. Always the instigator of a good joke, but unable to take one herself, she didn't like it when I poked back that it was more in her recent taste of men, since she loved to brag about her rendezvous with her various lovers. Once she came back, giddy as a schoolgirl with an explosion of news. With all the buildup and excitement in her voice, you'd think she was the next crown princess, but she had given George Clooney a blowjob in the bathroom at some random event. She never let that one down. We all went to explore the towns surrounding Moroccan castles and meet their royalty that lived in them. Jeffrey's personal interior designers met us at the residences. They walked around hurriedly, scribbling notes into their clipboards and whispering between themselves. The palaces were historically unique and beautiful, but I wondered how could they live so grandeur behind these walls when they lived in a city of such poverty-stricken squabble. Beggars lined the streets. People could just go missing and no one could care less. And you heard of barbaric murders happening every night. Against the advice of the palace attendant and Jeffrey's wishes, I decided to take a stroll one afternoon, mainly just to take photos of exotic Africa and do some shopping in the village markets, but I ended up being intrigued by a group of young children playing in the streets. When I was noticed watching them, about 15 of them came up to me and began to beg for money and food. I was overtaken by the poor, hungry children, and I felt sad for them all and wished I could help out somehow. When the tide of kids washed away and the street went empty, I was overcome with intrigue at these two little boys. Brothers, I found out later on. And there was only Their only excuse me for stuttering. Her spelling is not very good. Their only toy was an empty can they were kicking to each other in the middle of the street. Intelligent kids. They were able to speak 3 different languages, including English, and I was interested to ask them about life here. They didn't seem to notice or be bothered by their poverty-stricken lives. They told me about their school and parents, and I had thought I had just heard the saddest story ever, but they were accustomed to living like that, like I had been so accustomed to my degrading lifestyle for so long. I was compelled to empty out of the contents of my purse, giving them over $2,000 in U.S. currency. Passerby snapped a photo of the kids and me for myself to take home as a personal souvenir before they rushed home to proudly show their parents the money. I told Jeffrey later of my good deed, and he couldn't believe I'd give away my money so carelessly. He told me I had set up their parents with enough money to feed and shelter their family for a year. Wasn't that a good thing? I couldn't believe it. Not that I was well off or anything close to, but to realize how... I'm really trying not to judge it right now. But to realize how lucky I was and to not have compassion for the lesser off, especially children of a third world country. I wouldn't be human anymore. Then again, what did I expect from someone who could numerously steal another man's daughter for the use of his own sexual pleasure with great ease? We went out to lunch the following day with Jeffrey's team of designers to wrap things up, and after Jeffrey's afternoon massage, he went to the palace to have a nap. When I was all alone, I thought I'd go see the culture of the local unique markets again, and this time buy some trinkets to bring home. I got to sightseeing and took pictures of the legs of lamb hung over the blood-drenched doorway over people's homes, as to warn off evil spirits, and the ghettos where the local villagers called home. I walked into many of the market stalls and saw the most peculiar antiques, such as weaponry with the blood of its last victim stained on its sharp blades, and body pieces of various animals for the use of religious sacrifices. I was more interested in the different culture and respecting their ancient way of life with interest, instead of squirming like a tourist and getting grossed out. I thought it was so educational and enthralling, in fact. I ended up buying a few sacrificial trinkets to have sent to my apartment in Palm Beach. Not to say that I wasn't looking forward to getting back to the luxuries of Western civilization. It was a bit like camping. Fun and adventurous, but as equally dangerous and thrilling. Okay, camping is not like living in Africa, woman. When we left for the final destination of our trip, I was looking forward to eating normal food again. Not one to stray for foreign dishes. I'm more of a cheeseburger and pizza kind of girl, a true sign of my American heritage. We landed at Heathrow International and greeted by a driver. We were greeted by a driver, that's what I should say, that would take us to Ghislaine's townhouse in London Central that Jeffrey had recently bought and refurbished as a gift for her. Emmy said goodbye at the airport, leaving us to go to her hometown in the rural countryside nearby to visit family for a 6-week holiday from work. It wasn't a very long drive before we were in the heart of the city at Ghislaine's place. I thought it was a cheery townhouse that had character, and the historical pub in front of it and cobblestone streets only added a unique charm to its presence. They were going out for dinner and invited me along with them, but seeing I was so exhausted from all the traveling and looking a bit melancholy, I apologetically declined going out for dinner that evening. I rather would be taking a few pills to catch up on some needed sleep. Are you sure you're okay? Ghislaine asked as she showed me to my room. more considerate than she normally was, but I assured her that I was in absolute good health, just tired from all the recent jet lag. Without another word said, she whisked off downstairs to the car where Jeffrey was waiting for her. I took the liberty to call my parents to say hello and catch up with them since I hadn't been home at all for the holiday season this year. Always too busy working. They sounded really happy to hear from me, and my mom put me on the phone to talk to my brothers as well. I got to tell them about my travels abroad, and I had some cool tribal stuff from Africa that I brought for them. They sounded so proud of me, all of them, and why shouldn't they be? In everyone's convinced mind, I was making great money, traveling the world, and meeting new faces everywhere I went. Why should I spoil anyone's delusions, especially mine? I took my sleeping tablets and had a bath before falling into a deep and needed sleep. The next morning, I was awoken up by Ghislaine, who I could tell was in a chirpy mood by the way she paraded through my closed door, saying, "Wake up, sleepyhead," and opened the window shutters to let in the bright sunlight. She had never done anything like this before, and I knew immediately something big was happening. She sat down on my bed as I rolled over from my deep slumber, and I was able to mutter for an explanation as to why she was awake so early. Besides the fact it is 10 o'clock in the morning and nearly time for brunch, we have a big day planned out for you today. She was waiting for my cue to ask her, "What are we doing?" When I did, she responded with a convincing enthusiasm. "We're going shopping for a new ensemble." She paused for a moment to build the suspense before completing her sentence. "To go dancing with the Prince of England this evening." Hoping it would be one of the younger generations, I was disappointed when she told me it was the Duke of York, Charles's younger brother Andrew. I looked at her with a fake surprised look, one I had to use on many occasions in my time with them, to give an impression of excitement. "What? Wow!" I exclaimed with my gifted acting ability. It is a sad realization, but I had grown more accustomed to seeing people for their significance rather than the good qualities they possessed, and I was able to grin and bear the thought of what I expected lay in store for me. Ghislaine and I left shortly thereafter for the many lanes of designer shops to choose from in London. Probably went to Oxford Street. Her pep talks to prepare me for my duties towards royalty went on, giving me the obscure impression I was something of importance, at least for more than an evening. Make sure you're bubbly and energetic. Nobody wants a dead horse, was one of the cheap tools she instilled me with. Who knows where this could lead for you, was another. As the day grew shorter, my anxiety only heightened. Anticipating the prince's arrival and unable to decide on an outfit, I picked out 3. Our last stop for the day was Burberry's for a nice handbag to complement our chosen attire. We got back to our townhouse with still a couple hours spare to get ready. After trying on all 3 outfits and many mental debates with myself later, I decided on the pattern. It seemed a lot more my style and age group rather than the other 2 older, sophisticated-looking dresses I picked out. I told myself I was going dancing at a club, not an opera. At most, young girls can be during their body changes into womanhood. I felt awkward, big feet, freckles, and body hair in unwanted places. There are things you just don't want when you're 17, and then you see these iconic billboards of what femininity is supposed to represent, and just don't fit into that picture. Never feeling what we all are already. Absolutely perfect. By the time I got ready, I was a nervous wreck, but trying to keep my cool on the outside was an act. I thought it'd be a good idea to take a few Xanax before the evening unraveled, and my anxiety went through the roof. Jeffrey and I were sitting in the lounge room downstairs, waiting for Ghislaine to finish getting ready. The room was silent, only stillness in the air. I stared at the mural painted onto the wall that I was facing. It was an interesting piece of artwork. In great detail, it illustrated a happy-looking family sitting on a bench, overlooking a pond that resided on a large piece of land with a beautiful home displayed. That was a run-on sentence if I've ever seen one. There were also hunting hounds, and the hunters chasing a game of fox like the notorious English hunt pieces throughout history. Jeffrey took notice of my enchantment into the picture and in a hushed voice proceeded to tell me that it was a portrait of Ghislaine's childhood, the part she could be proud of. I never realized how prominent her family's history was in England. Apparently, as to Jeffrey's attest, her father was born of poor Jewish descent in Czechoslovakia, most of his family being killed upon Nazi invasion in 1939. Fleeing to join the British Army as a young man, he changed his name a few times and made a lot of contacts in the field. After the war, a newfound Robert Maxwell went into the publishing, using his army contacts to establish a business initially built upon publishing scientific books from occupied Germany. In time, Maxwell acquired several British newspapers, among them the Daily Mirror, countering his wits against the likes of Rupert Murdoch along the way. However, whilst constructing his publishing empire, Maxwell compiled astronomical debts, and his equivocal financial dealings attracted the attention of governing authorities that judged him not to be looking out for his company's best interests. And in the end, it transpired that Robert Maxwell had been using proceeds from his employees' pension funds to meet his financial debts, ruining the futures of thousands of employees. Once an esteemed member of Parliament and publishing mogul, Robert's body was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean after he was found to be missing from his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, named after his favorite child. This happened whilst cruising the Canary Islands in 1991. Jeffrey went on to tell me that when her father died, she was inconsolable and in a very bad state. He picked her up from the trenches of despair and took her under his wing, and it's there she has stayed comfortable ever since. To Ghislaine, his particular need to have so many women around, and even his taste in younger than legal ones, didn't seem unconventional to her. It was her own father who was deemed a womanizer, and even took a second wife while still married to Ghislaine's mother. I would have never guessed this carefree, spirited, and vivacious woman had ever endured such sorrows. I couldn't help but look at her in a different light from then on, but not letting her know that I knew, to avoid any altercations between us. Like clockwork, Ghislaine came downstairs 5 minutes before Prince Andrew was to arrive, wearing a tight-fitted white woolly turtleneck singlet and a nice pair of loose-fitting trousers. Looking elegant and casual at the same time, a very hard look to achieve, but one Ghislaine had always easily mastered. They both seemed at ease, poking fun at my obvious nervous state. Just another ordinary night out for this extraordinary couple. The knock came at the door just after 6 o'clock in the evening. Ghislaine greeted him and the guard who would wait for his return in the car. She led him down the hall to where Jeffrey and I were sitting. We both stood up, and Jeffrey shook his hand, while Ghislaine proceeded to introduce me, and I was taught by her was English custom. We both kissed on the cheek. We all sat down in the lounges for some tea and biscuits while conversing idle chit-chat. By the sounds of it, Ghislaine knew well of his recently divorced ex-wife, Fergie, whom they were all taking turns in slandering for one reason or another. It was apparent there was some fresh wounds still lingering, and as good friends do, it was their way of helping him get over her. When his daughters were mentioned, Ghislaine and Jeffrey treaded lightly, only speaking highly of them and offering their sympathy to the young ones. The conversation turned to a much lighter subject. Andrew wanted to know more about this young guest they had to join them out for dinner and dancing that evening. And then the spotlight turned on me. I was more nervous than I had ever been before a night out with someone, probably the build-up Glenn and Jeffrey had hyped this meeting up to be. To break the ice, she played her favorite guessing game. How old do you think Jenna is? When Andrew guessed correctly, I was 17 years old. She was surprised, thinking I could have passed for younger. I guess we are going to have to trade you in soon, she laughed, always the first one to throw in her quick-witted two bits, all of them chuckling along with her. Hardly a laugh at all, unknown to me at the time, his eldest daughter is only 5 years my junior. I was finding it hard to make such conversation in the beginning, just laughing when the occasion called for it, and keeping up with Andrew's constant glances in my direction was all I could manage. The restaurant was a close drive for us with Andrew, his two guards and his driver following behind us. I was seated next to the prince for dinner and Glenn and Jeffrey next to each other, an evening preordained. I was supposed to flatter him with compliments and dote on his every word spoken, but I didn't even do that for Jeffrey. Blatantly, it would have felt awkward to act like a bimbo for him. Instead, I remained calm, cool, and collected, hoping that my nervousness wouldn't spill out at any given moment. The next place we were going was much more my style, and I found it easier to relax. We pulled up next to a nightclub called Tramp, a members-only club, and one of the most exclusive haunts in the world for the rich and famous to be seen for the last 40 or so years since its doors first opened. Andrew's guards waited outside while we all went in to hit the dance floor. Jeffrey, being the social introvert that he was, found the first available empty seat in the corner, but facing the dance floor to spend the evening watching everyone else have fun, and Andrew went to the bar to grab us all drinks. He came back with sparkling water for Jeffrey and a cocktail for the rest of us, already knowing that Jeffrey never drank alcohol. We downed our glasses and made our way to the crowded dance floor. That is interesting because that contradicts what I've heard that Andrew is a teetotaler. So apparently he does drink sometimes. Where I had the prince's utmost attention. Moving his hands across the curves of my body, not to shy away from the fact that he was in public, he was whispering sweet nothings into my ear and kissing my neck. For my UK folks, sweet nothings it's like a southern slang, basically just means like flirty phrases. Like your boyfriend or girlfriend says sweet nothings to you, right? I would just giggle, not really knowing how to reply to an aging man with a bad smile and terrible moves. It would sound too much of a lie if I retaliated back about his swagger. He was the most incredibly hideous dancer I had ever seen, and couldn't help but laughing on the dance floor and shooting glances of embarrassment to Jeffrey and Ghislaine, who are having a good time laughing at my expense, as they always did. After an hour of pelvic smashing to the DJ's pumping mixes, we finally exited the floor. His Royal Highness was dripping with sweat and ready to embark onto a quieter scene where he said we could be alone, not knowing that it had already been arranged for all of us to meet back at Glenn's place, but complied with his so-called thoughtful request. I was so anxious about getting back to the townhouse, knowing what expectations I would have to not only have met, but also exceed in this case. Yeah, I'm just going to take a quick pause here. It's interesting because I do think this person, whoever wrote this for Virginia, or whoever helped her, because I do think she had help, because she never uses this sort of vocabulary when she speaks. Despite that, there's a ridiculous amount of spelling errors and syntax errors too. So I think she did get help, but whoever helped her did not do a good job. Okay, continuing on. Ghislaine and Jeffrey seemed impressed at my attempts to entertain His Royal Highness, so far giving him exactly what he wanted, the impression that I idolized him. They told me that he really liked me and was having a great time so far tonight. When we got to the townhouse, his guards walked him to the door, staying to wait outside in the car. Ghislaine met him and brought him upstairs where Jeffrey and I were in the study. We all chatted in the hall for a few minutes, and I was able to have Jeffrey snap a photo of us together, one that would cause much controversy for the Buckingham Palace and many years to come. The conversation didn't linger on much longer before Jeffrey and Ghislaine dispersed downstairs together, leaving me to my own sort of royal duties. They walked away giddy as if they were teenagers imposing on young lovers about to embark on a romantic evening. Next to the study was the bathroom where I led him to next. The room was dimly lit, masking the light from showing the disparity in my eyes. It was a beige marble tilted floor with porcelain Victorian-style bathtub in the middle of the room and nowhere near the size of Jeffrey's residences. I turned on the taps for the tub, and the heat from the water began to steam up the small room. On the basin were aromatic oils, lotions, and soaps. Loving the scent of floral notes, I poured in the lavender bath oil. Trying to do the best of my youthfulness to try and act seductive, I gradually began to strip off my clothing, piece by piece, giving him time to savor the moment to come. He loved every second of it as I went over to where he was waiting and watching, then began to undress him at a much quicker pace. We kissed and touched each other before submerging into the hot water, where we both continued to reenact foreplay. He was adorning my young body, particularly my feet, caressing my toes and licking my arches. I don't understand feet fetishes, man. This was definitely a first for me, and I couldn't help but laugh. I hope he didn't expect the same treatment back. Through my recent experiences with Rena, I drew a line with extreme fetishes, especially ones that would involve my tongue and feet in the same sentence. It wasn't hard to get him wound up to the point where he just wanted to have the rest of me, so he dried off from the cold and retired to my bedchambers for the longest 10 minutes of my life. Moments later, and without any real emotional attachment, he burst in ecstasy, leaving me to my own feelings of dismay. As relieved as I was to see the experience come to pass with him, it was finally sinking in that I would never be anything more than but a muse, still trying to ascertain a surreal dream a young girl once held, but no longer the same girl I was, no longer sure that the dream was even real anymore. In the whirlwind thrown together by wealth, power, and privilege, I was but a grain of sand and felt helpless down the road I was naively being led. When the real picture was unveiled later in my life, I had nothing but memories filled with sorrow to remember of my teenage years. Jeffrey, Ghislaine, and I left for the States to conclude our long journey home to the USA. I was so happy when we landed on our soil and called TJ from my cell to see if he'd meet me at the airport instead of going back to Jeffrey's. He'd be there within 20 minutes. He was so happy to hear my voice and that I was back in town. So ecstatic to be getting away from my life of servitude for the next few days, I was sourly disappointed when I got off the phone. As if he'd been listening to my entire conversation, Jeffrey told me he'd like a massage back at his place, and he could pay me at the same time for my trip with him. With much dismay, I had to call TJ back and cancel the arrangements. I wouldn't see him until later that night, which one of Jeffrey's staff would drive me home, and I would be too exhausted to do anything. End of chapter 11. Okay, I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break and fix the lighting, and I will be right back. Let me know what you guys think so far. And I'm back, people. I'll just look at comments real quickly before we continue. Came across some articles that describe Rom Eppinger as a family friend who Virginia got involved with when she was 12. Didn't she say she met him by chance when he pulled up in a limousine? That is what I recall reading. Yes, that is what is written in this account, is that she met him at a bus stop when he pulled up via limousine. That's interesting. Thanks for tuning in, Linda. Looks, you talking about me, Sean? Dolly, Chris, thanks for tuning in, everyone. And, oh, Lufa, of course, too. Okay, I will continue. And let me just put on a ticker here. And let's continue. Chapter 12. When we got back to Jeffrey's mansion in Palm Beach, he wanted to thank me for showing his friend the prince such a good time, rewarding my diligence with an extra sum of money and luring me deeper into his goal of keeping me at his side as his personal amusement that he could lend out at any time, further proving his capability of using the vulnerable impressions of a young girl to influence and intimidate his fellow peers of like minds. Jeffrey didn't want to know the grim details of how it all happened on my intimate night with the prince. He just asked simply if I thought that I did well in keeping his friend happy. Knowing already that the evaluation of my performance I gave was already discussed between them, I just as simply replied back with a nod of approval. Though I did have a laugh with Jeffrey about the prince's weird fixation on my feet, and let's just say that he was quite tickled with Andrew's quirky obsession, having a good old chuckle at my eccentric encounter. I was paid extremely well this time, putting my money earned into nothing but popping pills and alcohol, by shouting my so-called friends a good time, aiming for the attempt to forget about my experiences abroad. I partied like that to feel young again, my age, and most of all to self-anesthetize my troubles from within. It wasn't like I was waiting for someone to arrive on his white horse and take me away to a magical world. I simply yearned for more out of life than being someone's replaceable amusement. Still a romantic at heart, I would often get lost in my daydreams, imagining a new beginning with a strong man that would show me an enduring love, safety in his arms, and a lifetime friendship. Though the suggestion of true love's existence was only a dream for now, something I could only read about in novelistic fairy tales, but the passing thought from time to time was warmly envisioned. With my innermost desires being locked away in a deep crevice of my heart, I knew my romantic notions would be absurd in Jeffrey's eyes. For some unknown reason to me, he couldn't allow himself to give love or receive someone's heart in return. Once he said to me when I asked him if he ever thought he would settle down and find Mrs. Right, and told me he didn't believe that love with one monogamous partner was possible, but he found that love with many was. I thought at the time it had something to do with having so much money, and everyone wanting him for that, instead of seeing him as a person, and even felt bad for him. But now I can understand from his recent lessons unlearned that it was a simple equation of his twisted perversion to become infatuated with the vulnerable youth off the streets. Spending so much time in the entrapment of Jeffrey's embrace, I was becoming numb to the feelings and aspiration to ever climb above this deep hole I had dug myself into. I knew I wanted to escape from this bizarre form of first-class slavery, but I still didn't have the tools necessary to get me out. How could I have? Everyone that knew me believed I was living this enchanting life, a rags to riches success story that most people dream of. Only I knew the price to be paid for all this, and I was the only one who could pay it. Underestimating my true self, I was settled by Jeffrey's side for now, considering him someone to look up to, my mentor. Such a complicated battle within myself. It is one I still ache to fully comprehend today. Sunny spring days melted away the ice off of the frozen streets of New York, and the harsh winter winds began to gently blow away the dead leaves, making the caged trees appear to have some form of life again. I hated the winters here. It would only add to my depression being locked indoors. Give me some hot Florida days blistering in the sun where I can swelter by a cool pool and sip cocktails with pieces of fruit and little oriental umbrellas floating around. What a vision of solace. Looking around my extravagantly decorated medieval room, I was reminded of the desolation that I was far more than accustomed to. Knowing it wouldn't be long before I was summoned again for another ritualistic occurrence in fornicating with my master, I hardly bothered to leave my assigned chambers, scarcely being sent home for a moment's break. I just accepted my fate. As I predicted, the intercom buzzed momentarily, and I heard Glenn's voice come over and request to meet them in Jeffrey's study. Not an alt call. I would often meet him there first, so he could tie up some unfinished business before heading to the dungeon, or what was thought to be the massage room. Making my way down the hall, I had an eerie feeling wash over me, as if I had several pairs of eyes on me. Watching my every move. A cold chill moved up my spine. I had to move my thoughts elsewhere. Too easy behind these walls to succumb to my fearsome anxieties. I punched in number 1 once inside the elevator, and it took me down to the floor where Jeffrey and his surprise guests were waiting with anticipation behind closed doors. I cracked open the heavy wooden doors, and a familiar face revealed itself. Definitely not expected or pre-warned on my part, but I already knew what he was here for, or at least why I was called down to the study. Prince Andrew had that notorious cheesy grin slapped over his face as he looked up and down like a shiny new car on display. As he looked me up, then down like a shiny car on display, and he was about to take it for a test drive. Glenn led me to a decadent sofa he was lounging on and twirled me around to give him a good look over before sitting me down on his lap. Like a show pony, I knew exactly how they wanted me to be paraded around, with the last of my dignity long lost. I had nothing more to lose. It was easy to give them the reaction they desired. All I had to do was pretend to be entertained by their lewd gestures. And when Andrew cupped my breast with a doll made in his image, I only giggled away. Glenn wanted to take a picture of the bizarre scene and even got Joanna, another one of Jeffrey's so-called personal assistants, to come sit on his other knee for the snapshot, giving the impression girls couldn't stay away from Randy Andy. Many crude jokes later, and I was asked to show Andrew to the upstairs massage room. I'm sure he already knew where it was from previous encounters with Jeffrey's staff, but I led the way anyways, as if he was now my guest of honor. Entering into the dim room, it took a few minutes for my eyes to adjust to the darkness, but knowing my way around the room was enough to find the shower. I turned on the steam room and began to undress myself. Andrew followed my lead and disrobed, throwing his attire to the floor. I wanted to run and hide, feeling his hands touch me again, but my servitude for Jeffrey kept me there. Getting out of his stronghold, I turned my attention to the steam filling up and tried to turn his attention to the marble bench, where I suggested he take a seat while I rubbed his feet. By the look in his eyes, I knew he couldn't care less about a foot massage. His real desires were being shown by the arousal his body was forming. He indicated where he wanted me to touch him and how. I fulfilled his seedy request, but only just. There was no pleasure in this for me. The only thing I derived from this event was to sink further into my slumber of depression. I couldn't remember a time when I felt needed for anything other than my body or amusements thereof. After his massage was thoroughly conducted, I couldn't wait to get back to my room for another shower. Sitting on the floor of my shower under the harsh spray of water, I scrubbed my body where he touched me. Feeling abhorrent and ashamed of what I had become, I let the water wash away the grime. As the days progressed into nights, and the nights followed a trail of destructive months, my outlook on life had diminished into utter sadness. I had lost my spark and my ability to look like I could handle the abusive state of affairs I had drifted into. Seeking deeper into the euphoric state of being on coke and pills, not only was my mentality dwindling away, but also my looks. I sure as hell didn't feel like a 17-year-old anymore, and now I wasn't even looking like one. My eyes had dark circles underneath them from not sleeping, and my bones protruded from my skinny waistline and chest. This made Jeffrey apprehensive in keeping me around as often, and before I had a moment's notice, I was out of money and looking for a job. When I questioned him what was happening, he told me I wasn't the same girl he had first met some time ago now, and looked like I needed a break from working so much. "I'll call you the next time in town," was the last thing he said to me. End of chapter 12. Going back to an average teenager's life was more of a hard transition than I would have ever thought. Jeffrey stopped paying my expensive rent, and I was forced to get off the drugs and look for a real job to feed and shelter TJ and I. It was much harder than it sounded, but I was craving this in every possible way. Even though a full week's wages for working a full-time job as a waitress didn't even come close to the money I had made in a couple of hours working for Jeffrey, I was happier than I had been in a long time. I made some friends at my new job and found my duties to be easy and pleasant. I was good at making customers smile and keeping them happy because the waitress that made the most tips for the night, which in turn made my coworkers happy, since we'd all split the tips at the end of the week. For the first time in a long time, I had boys my age hitting on to me. And not that I was ever taken aback by their attempts, but it reminded me of how it felt to be around a younger crowd. I missed so much of what I couldn't get back, and the more I tasted it, the more I remembered how to smile. The relationship between TJ and I began to falter in a way that was beyond reconciliation. Fights became physical, and I saw sides to him that only pushed me away more. He refused to look for work to help pay the bills, and he became utterly frustrated not having his usual cocktail of assorted drugs to keep him from feeling anything at all. He didn't like the fact that I was growing inside and thinking beyond his elusive world. I had gone through too much to accept another form of abuse and degradation, making that point very clear to him by kicking him out of my apartment back to live with his parents. I felt liberated like never before. I kept up with my rent and cleaned my act up. Enrolling in a yoga course and keeping my focus on staying fit and healthy became my only source of enjoyment. I was free and living for myself. While out doing the grocery shopping one evening, I couldn't help but stop at the local pet store and fell in love with a furry pooch. She was a Japanese chow chow and a bundle of fur that more resembled a baby brown bear than a dog. I took her home with me, and instantly she became my best friend. We went for several walks a day, and she bore the brunt of many tear-filled conversations. She was my loyal companion who understood more than anyone had before. All I really need was someone to listen, and funny enough, it was her that filled that hole. Nearly 3 months had gone by, and not a word from Jeffrey or Ghislaine. With TJ out of the picture now, too, I had to concentrate on all I had to concentrate on was work, my parents and my brothers, and of course, my dog, Mary Jane. I was going to family night dinners and bonfires again. My older brother was getting married to an amazing woman in a few weeks, and I got to be a part of their beautiful ceremony. Small details of life's journey that I already missed so much of, and now being able to smile at the simple things day in, day out, really seemed to put the real value of life into perspective for me. Everything seemed to be working out for itself, and I was really happy. Until he came back. TJ thought he'd come over my place one evening while I was just sitting at home watching TV. Obviously mentally distorted from whatever choice of drugs he was smoking that night. He screamed down my apartment complex, going mad and scaring my neighbors. I felt like I had no choice but to let him inside. I tried talking to him as a good friend would, just wanting him to see what he was doing to himself and what he had become. Part of me still loved him and took pity on watching him spiral downwards. Taking him back into my life was not a decision I made wholeheartedly, but was something I did out of guilt and what I thought was loyalty. He moved his clothes back into my place, which was all he ever owned anyways. We tried to pick up the broken pieces. TJ, being still badly addicted to many drugs, I had to be very careful where I kept my jewelry and expensive items. I decided to rent out a space at a local spot and store my cherished items away, just taking the necessary precautions, I thought. Still not working, I knew how he was scraping by money. Still not working, I knew how he was scraping by money, and I didn't agree with it. TJ was a known thief and had been caught several times attempting to steal things, even as stupid as DVDs and PS2 or Xbox games from a local blockbuster. He even stole from his parents, his sister, and his brother, and would probably steal a piece of candy from a 5-year-old kid if he knew that it would get him his next fix. He hated the change in myself, realizing I couldn't be brought back down by his ways, but knowing I still stuck by his side and defended him from anything that would hurt him, wanting to believe that he still wanted to show the bits of human nature left in his empty heart. Unable to stand by and see me do well for myself, he contemplated a way to try and bring me down. After a busy shift one night, he retaliated with another show of control. I had just finished cleaning up my area and setting out the tables to be ready for the next day when I went to the bar to hang up my apron and put my night's tips in the tip bowl on the counter by the beer tap. On one of his drug-induced rampages, he stormed into the restaurant where I was working and started to pick a fight with me. I knew he was off his face when he started accusing me of sleeping with my manager on shift that evening, having no bias to ground to stand on in his attempt to make me look bad in front of everyone. I just laughed him off as a drunk idiot who needed to go home and sleep off the night's repercussions, although I was fuming inside that he embarrassed me. But I still made excuses for him and told my boss I had to leave early to bring him home. The bar was deserted as TJ waited alone for me, slumped in a bar stool and looking worse for wear. I had to go to the back of the restaurant and do some explaining to the manager on duty. I couldn't afford to lose my job over this incident. Surprisingly, he was sympathetic towards my dilemma and even told me I could do a lot better than that schmuck, patting my back and telling me to have a couple days off. I punched out and headed to my car with TJ in tow. For the rest of the night, he was oddly quiet and asked to be dropped off at his parents' house. I was more than obliged to do so. I couldn't stand the sight of him, let alone want to be around him that night. Being so revved up, it didn't yet dawn on me that something wasn't right. The next morning, I was woken up by an alerting phone call. I had the manager from the restaurant where I worked on the other end screaming at me and asking where the money is. I sat up in bed, completely awake now, and asked him back, "What are you talking about? What money?" His tone had calmed a bit, and he could hear the earnestness in my voice, and explained his accusations. The tip jar was empty after you had left last night, and there was over $150 in there. Now it's missing. The answer hit me instantly, and I got a terrible knot in my stomach. TJ. When I left him at the bar, not even thinking about the tip bowl, to talk with the manager, he saw an opportunity to fund more drugs, and he took it. That's why he didn't even want to come back to my apartment last night. It was all too clear for me now, and I tried to explain to my manager about my boyfriend's sickness and asked him to take the lost money out of my wages. Oh my goodness. I have no choice but to let you go and file a police report for the missing money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How did things turn upside down so quickly? I exclaimed, even though I'm paying you from my pocket for money I didn't even steal, and you've never even had any problem from me before? His apologies were short and icy. Nothing that could be done. I slammed down the receiver only to pick it up again to dial TJ's parents' house. And to no surprise, he hadn't slept there last night and was not able to be reached. I felt like I was in a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. And with no money to pay rent, eat, or even survive, I was back to the drawing board. The week passed without hearing from TJ. He wasn't hiding for now. When the phone rang early one morning, I expected it to be him. Instead, it was a surprise phone call from a familiar voice. Jeffrey decided to give me a call to invite me over to his Palm Beach mansion for some lunch and to catch up. It was really just his way of finding out if I was cleaned up and ready to come back to work for him. Okay, what I don't understand is the end of the last chapter, she said that was the last time she heard from Jeffrey. Obviously, it wasn't. Continuing. Let me get a sip real quick. With my life in chaos once again, and having to borrow money off my parents for grocery food, I saw a quick solution to my situation and was even convinced this is what I had to do to take care of myself. He greeted me at the door and led me inside. Ghislaine was at her usual spot, her desk working away, and we headed past her with a quick wave and lip-synced a hello, not wanting to disturb her important-sounding phone call. She glanced up quickly and gave a brisk wave my way, then put her attention back to the computer. Once we were inside the poolside cabana, which is Jeffrey's office and gym, Jeffrey took a seat behind his desk and told me to have a seat across from him. He took a sip of water from an already poured glass and asked if I'd like some. Yes, thank you. My reply was short and polite. Already just wanting to get this meeting done and over with. His face was like steel and his expressions stern. I felt like a child in trouble sitting in the principal's office. He cut straight to the chase, wanting to know, "Are you on drugs anymore?" There was a moment's pause as I took a deep breath and told him the entire truth. I got really depressed for a while and coped with my emotions by blanketing them with mind-altering substances. Just smoking a J to relax wasn't good enough anymore. I needed to be high and flying to believe I was happy and dealing with all of life's curveballs. Snorting things like coke and popping amphetamines replaced my sorrows with an overflow of endorphins, making it possible to keep up with everything until I would come down and the cycle just kept on repeating itself. He listened to me continue to tell him about the good things that have come from the break. Like my dog, yoga, and working at a restaurant, making lots of new friends, but most of all, I got my smile back. Without the drugs this time. He was really happy to hear the upside of everything. But there was one thing I was reluctant to tell him about. My recent travail that TJ effortlessly caused at the restaurant where I was so happily employed. As my manager had warned, he had to file a police report stating that after I left, the tips were gone, putting the blame solely on me. Giving Jeffrey a clear picture of the entire ordeal, he exclaimed, "What are you doing with this idiot, Jenna? He is no good for you. I know you can do better for yourself. Why do you let him drag you down every time?" Nodding my head in concurrence, I went on to finish my epic drama. I received a phone call from the PBCP asking me to come in about the money. I told them what happened over the phone, but they still want me to come in. Really? They don't care if you actually did it or not. I don't want to have a record for something I never did or would ever do. Again, the police do not care about what actually happened. All they care about is enslavement. I put my face into my hands and covered the tears now trickling down my cheeks. I just can't believe this is happening to me when everything has been going so uphill. Now I'm out of work and in trouble. I wiped my face and looked up at him. What do I do? Enabling him as my mentor once again, his sly grin said it all. Jeffrey normally hated when girls made waves in any way, and this one would be considered a tsunami, but this time it worked to his favor. He wanted me to come back to work for him, continuing my massage studies, and I needed his help. In his eyes, he was doing me a solid, which in return, I would have to scratch more than his back for. Taking his time to contemplate what to respond back and what solution he could offer, I began to worry that maybe I shouldn't have done this. Pulling a few tissues out of the box, he passed them across the desk to me. Trying to retract any damage done, I said to him, "I must look like such a mess to you, and making you listen to my saga. I am so sorry. I shouldn't have come to you with all this." He looked surprised and sympathetic. Quite the opposite, actually. "I'm glad you've come to me for help. I've got a lot of connections, especially with the Palm Beach County Police Department. I give them regular $100,000 donations, and after I speak with them, there will be nothing more to worry about. To be honest, I'm more in shock about how much can happen to you in such a short time. Your life is one big soap opera." Now he was chuckling and trying to make light of my somber mood. Laughing along too, I replied, "I know, right? Drama just hangs around me like a bad smell." We did some more lighthearted catching up and went to the poolside for some lunch and a swim, concluding the evening with an erotic massage upstairs. He paid me the usual $200 and asked me to come back tomorrow. At least pay her more, bro. Like, why doesn't he just, like, dude is so cheap. In the meantime, I don't want you thinking about your sticky situation. Consider it dealt with. His attempt to brighten my spirits had worked. Relieved about money and the police, but now I owed myself to him, feeling indebted to him now more than ever. End of chapter 13. And I will continue. I just gotta take a sip real quick. Chapter 14. As was promised, I never heard back from the police department, and Jeffrey had his favorite girl back by his side. We picked up where we left off, but ever better than before. I was entirely subservient to every sexual desire of his, engaging myself in any role he wanted me to play. As he was getting older, his appetite for sex never hazed. If anything, it only increased. The orgies with other girls got larger in numbers, and his appeal to younger girls, new toys, and wilder nights expanded from once in a while to quite an often occurrence in Jeffrey's company. I put it down to his new friend and business investment, John Luke Brunel. Chapter 14. I'm titling this one the French Agent. Yeah. A longtime agent for young and upcoming models, Brunel, a French citizen, was known for roaming the world in search of young, naive beauties living in poverty-stricken countries and willing to do just about anything for money. He would procure them mostly from clubs in South America and the former Soviet Republic, filling their heads with fairy tales of America and large amounts of money. He would promise them all the finer things in life, sometimes even throwing a pill in the drink if that meant getting them in his bed was becoming too much of a task. What we wanted is what we got, which is why him and Jeffrey ultimately became close pals, and he invested $1 million into Brunel's company. In return, Jeffrey now had supplies of girls on tap for him to choose from. With the assistance of each other, Brunel obtained the illegitimate visas for underage overseas girls, and Jeffrey housing them at his brother's apartment complex, his brother being Mark, on 301 East 66th Street, Manhattan. They were quite the team. Jeffrey and Brunel would charge them for rent, forcing them to work for them, selling their bodies for money, nude pictures, and even pornography. These were what seemed like really nice people with not so nice intentions, setting an impression of how the dignified wealth play, and behind closed doors, they had as much civilized manners as a barbaric chimpanzee in heat. Giving a girl a step up in finances by teaching them their only worth is what lay between their legs. Us girls all were in the same end, regardless of what country we were from, what language we spoke, or our cultural indifferences. We were all being used for one thing alone, our youthful looks and beautiful bodies. Being Jeffrey's permanent sidekick, I would have to partake in many of the hedonistic exploitations that went on at one of his many residences, which meant having to be uninhibited with many girls my age and younger. Being complete strangers was hard enough, but we couldn't even understand each other. Speaking in different tongues, we were expected to excel at performing many acts of lovemaking and foreplay on each other, while being observed by a man in a corner jerking off. Not exactly what I would call an advantage in my stage of life, but in my head, I was convinced we all had to do what we had to do to get on with life. And if that meant doing all of this to keep Jeffrey happy, then I would do that. It didn't take long in the accompaniment of Brunel for Jeffrey to hit an all-time low, at least one that I knew about. Stupid enough or sick enough, I don't know which one it is, or both, but Jeffrey bragged about his birthday present from Brunel, once accepting 3 12-year-old girls, sisters at that. He replayed the descriptive events with me, telling me how they all massaged him and finished him off orally. He was so excited about the entire event, replaying over and over again over the next course of weeks how cute they were and how you could tell they were really young by the small amount of hair growth in their pubic region and non-existent breasts. A 12-year-old? Are you serious? I thought to myself. I still can't shake the feeling of disgust when I recall the look on his face as he told me time and time again of how his lust brought him to that profound low. He went on to tell me how Brunel bought them in Paris, France, from their parents, offering them the usual sums of money. Visas and modeling career prospects was a bribe of the worst kind. They were just children. Laughing the whole way through, Jeffrey thought it was absolutely brilliant how easily money seduced all walks of life. Nothing or no one that couldn't be bought in his eyes. Behind the two of them followed a destructive trail of those in their path that were misused, violated, degraded in a variety of ways for one purpose: to satisfy the desires of the perversion that rotted their hearts. The next couple of months I spent in Jeffrey's company. My life was revolved around him and his petty happiness. Arising to the occasion, I was no longer his teenage sidekick. I was growing into being a young woman, and my body was blossoming like never before. Out of the awkward stages of my life, I now took to looking after myself like never before. Regular sessions and tanning beds and keeping fit became my life outside of Jeffrey. He kept telling me what a beautiful woman I was developing into and would offer suggestions to help me look good. Sending me to dentists for regular teeth whitening consultations or helping me to choose my attire for the evening, he was ushering me into a whole new position, training me up for something else, but I was unsure of what that was. Being a snotty little teenager was a girl of the past. Now I had to be his eloquent speaking, desirable to all, and almost his personal porcelain doll. I went everywhere with him again. All of his eclectic dinner parties, conferences, and meetings with various members of parliament, famous celebrities, and other esteemed billionaires, most of whom lived by the same rule of thumb as Jeffrey. Quite an alarming realization, having to accept this world the way it is. Jeffrey knew all the right people in this game, and trading girls for favors is how he kept it in the circle. He was at the center of it all, blackmail being the only thing next to money with the ability to pull as many strings. His conniving ulterior motive was to drag all that he could down to his pitiful state of mind. Inviting easily tempted acquaintances to his island or his other various residences, he'd bring out the assortment of young girls and pass them around like they were cocktails on a platter. No girl had a choice in whom they went with, only completing a task. We would have to charm and bedazzle these aging fat men who, other than paying for it, would have never had a shot at getting to know a beautiful girl intimately. I, personally belonging to Jeffrey, rarely had to be loaned out, and it was a big occasion, or should I say, favor, if I was. I'll never really know what made me so important or special to Jeffrey. It definitely had nothing to do with love. I guess in the end, I will always put it down to my capability of being whoever he wanted when he wanted. So compliant, it just made it easy for him to have a personal toy at his constant disposal. All I can say is I lived in jail with no bars, and in a country where slavery was supposedly abolished a long time ago, but still existed right underneath everybody's noses. Myself and so many other girls were walking proof of it. I still was given proper training in a massage therapy from time to time, keeping me from looking back at being a teenager with no responsibilities to being a young adult with prospering titles. I knew I wanted to be self-sufficient so bad I would do anything for it. And by giving me this dream to hold to only kept me in check. I looked forward to my training sessions, holding on to every word passed down to me, and after the session was complete, I would hurry back to my room and transfer the information into a workbook with associating exercises. Trying my new moves on Jeffrey always impressed him. He would get excited hearing about my passion for knowledge and would tell me he could see it transfer into my massages, always giving it my all. My hands were a focused energy when I was at work. Using every ounce of strength to apply in a body, many were astounded in what I could do for being such a small girl. And Jeffrey loved it, using me for 2-hour massage with benefits, sometimes being over twice a day. Glenn would sometimes use me to massage her still, but it wasn't as common. She preferred a man for that job. Then would come the odd client here and there, of course set up by Jeffrey, most of which were orchestrated to get beautiful girls comfortable and consequently naked. Then he would go in for the kill, so to speak, touching them intimately in their most private of places like their vagina, breasts, or it's supposed to say anus, it says anal. When he had us where he wanted, willing and able, then would come the toys, outfits, and so on. A scheme he has used time and time again, telling those who know him well he had never been turned down yet. It was starting to dawn on me how I wasn't getting any clientele that weren't used for Jeffrey's benefit, and would make me wonder if I just wasn't good enough for that. But I kept quiet, never wanting to make waves like I had before. To give me a break from it all, as if Jeffrey didn't want to overload me again, he would send me away to his ranch for a few days, what he knew I considered being a small slice of heaven on earth. I'd spend my days roaming the hills, riding horses, and enjoying the solitude of my own company. One afternoon, I was out exploring the land on Jeffrey's ranch, which covered hundreds of acres, with nothing but a bottle of water, my sketchbook, and a small case of oil paint. I was on the search for something interesting to paint. A great pastime of mine, it made my soul quiet by creating beauty with my brush. I loved to recreate the images I saw on paper. I would paint anything beautiful that caught my eye's interest. From underwater scenes, animals to people, and even fruit. I loved the vibrant colors and emotion on display, but my favorite soon became the landscape of the Santa Fe rolling hills. Earthly green and beige tones, and in certain light, it would illuminate to a golden shine. To grasp that feeling, I was absolved in at the hardest of times, because my greatest inner achievement, like taking a piece of that serenity and putting on paper for me to keep in my heart where it still is today. Closing my eyes, I am able to see it, being there anytime I need to. I was enjoying the heat and taking in the desert sights again when I stumbled off the track and into the wilderness. Exploring everything new to me was my second nature, and never even entered my mind what would have happened if I went too far or got lost. I would rather face Mother Nature's wrath than humankind's any day. After about an hour of drifting off track, old pueblo made out of clay and rock. I picked up what looked like half a clay bowl and noted that it had Indian designs etched into the side of it. Excited about my findings, I decided to do some more exploring around the fields surrounding the historic site. I collected rare pieces of arrowheads, utensils, and parts of many broken bowls with artwork telling tales of their own. Time was of no essence here, and before I even realized, the sun had sunk deeper into the hills, leaving me without any light to find my way back to the pathway. Feeling silly now, after taking me over 3 hours to find my way back to the path and in the direction of Jeffrey's mansion was a mission. So relieved in the end, and so were the housemaids after I hadn't shown up for dinner, assuming I must have been out for one of my usual adventures. I went to bed strenuously exhausted that night, and as I was falling asleep, the phone rang. It was a call from Jeffrey, who had been alerted of my disappearance. What happened tonight? One of the maids called me to tell me you hadn't come back from your walk this evening. Detecting a tone of anger in his voice, I tried to distract him by telling him of my findings, and he scolded me for being gone for so long without anyone knowing where I was. Going back to the Indian remnants, I persisted on telling him what I had found. In the end, he was just worried about me becoming a liability, but he had to make it sound as if he cared. Don't worry, Jeffrey, I won't be doing that again. I can honestly say I have learned my lesson, and the next time I want to explore, I promise to take someone with me. I satisfied his worry of me being a future nuisance, and with that, I was finally able to tell him what I had discovered on my walk. He was impressed, but did not sound surprised. You must have been gone a long time if you found the old Indian pueblos. Just be careful you don't say anything about where you found the stuff on my property. It could become a site for historical preservation, and that means the government could ultimately own my land. I acknowledged his request and told them they were just a gift for my mom, who was in love with Indians. Wait until she sees what I brought. I brought her back real artifacts. She is going to totally freak out. He didn't mind that I was taking them. In fact, he admired my curiosity and adventurous spirit. He reminded me that tomorrow was the last day. I would be driven to the Albuquerque International Airport the day after next to meet Jeffrey in New York. For how long? Only he knew. Giving Jeffrey many thanks for a great week, letting him know how much I appreciated these small breaks away, we then said goodnight. Hanging up the phone, I had caught my second wind and set out to the kitchen to find a late-night snack. Raiding the fridge and pantry, I found some frozen pizzas and popcorn. I put on a movie and munched on the popcorn while the pizza cooked. Some 1980s dreadful alien flick got the better of me that night. It was based on a true story about people abductions from extraterrestrial beings, which were, like I was, visiting a remote area. I suddenly hated being alone on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. I munched down my burnt, crunchy pizza and became further enveloped in the fake plot. Leaving on the TV and the lights that night, I spent my night tossing and turning, peeking through the small open crevices of the comforter, half expecting to see an alien living in my bedroom. Living through the night was a relief, and I laughed at myself in the morning. How spooked did I get? When I got to New York, Jeffrey and Ghislaine had a good laugh over my tale of survival in the wilderness and then the alien scare. They're always having the best adventures, Ghislaine exclaimed. We were similar in that way, both being a bit of free spirits. It was really only her non-existence of moral standards that differentiated the two of us in that way. How do you know you weren't abducted and probed? I mean, look at you and all that time alone on the ranch. What do you think, Jeffrey? Could she pass off as an alien? Expectedly, Ghislaine poked fun at me, her usual fun pastime. Our relationship was an odd one, never threatened by each other, but always precautious towards one another nonetheless, able to crack a joke together. But when it came time to work, it was no fun and games. She was intensely serious. With a sense of humor like yours, I would tend to think that you are the one from another planet. Just friendly banter between the two of us. Then Jeffrey had to jump in with his 2 bits. I think you might be on to something, Glenn. I squinted my eyes and gave them both an exaggerated death stare and pretended to grab my stomach in pain. I think something's trying to get out of me, putting my fist in my shirt to reenact a scene from Alien. I fell onto the couch and faked my death. I knew it, Ghislaine shouted, and jumped on me to begin tickling me all over, and we all broke out in laughter. It was those fun times that made me feel like we're all part of this really perplexed family. We did everything together similar to normal families, like eat dinner, watch TV, and travel. It was only the hedonistic and corrupt side to these two deviants that made them a peculiar pair. Getting turned on at the two of us playing together. Goddamn, this guy. Jeffrey came over to the couch we were on and pulled down his sweatpants, revealing his erect manhood. All of the laughter stopped. Now it was time for work. Pushing my head into his pubic region, I had to give in to his perverted wants. Ghislaine started to undress me. Once I was bare, she loved starting with my breasts. She cupped them in her hands and brushed her fingers over my hardened nipples, heading downwards, pressing her lips deeply into my skin. I had to maneuver my body on the couch in a complex position to give them both what they wanted. And just like that, without even a moment's notice, I could be put on the spot and have to amuse them in any way they wanted. A shameful way to make someone feel like a used toy. I wasn't around for companionship. I was there for one thing. I was a compliant piece of eye candy. 20 minutes later, and Jeffrey had erupted in pleasure. Ghislaine sat up, still fully dressed, and wiped the sides of her mouth with her hands, giving a vindictive little chuckle. That was fun. Jeffrey concurred with a sly grin, arching his back for a stretch, just looking able to utter the request. God dang it, dude. Why don't you come up with me upstairs for a steam bath and massage? I need to be loosened up after that. It was more of a statement than a request, as if I had a choice to say, no thanks, I'm actually tired myself and would love to just relax. Instead, I would reply with my accustomed, trained obedience. No problem. When you're ready, lead the way. I had to get dressed again, being that we were in Ghislaine's downstairs office. Putting my clothes back on, Ghislaine thought she had buttered him up just where she wanted him, to ask for him to come have a look at her new townhouse renovations when he was finished with his massage. A very strange relationship those two have. There's a definite love flowing between them, but not a passionate one. More like a respectful business. He gets what he wants, an uncountable number of girls, and she gets what she wants, simple and sweet, an uncountable amount of money. The two things in life that can create such beautiful moments, or the most horrendously terrible of them all, is sex and money. I joined him for a shower, steam bath, and concluded his needs with a massage while listening to classical music. I knew he didn't want anything sexual from me now, seeing he got what he already wanted downstairs. No, this one was purely therapeutic. My favorite massages to give, making me feel like an actual real therapist. I lathered him in aromatic oils and let my hands discover the ways to unlock the stresses that his body held. After the massage was concluded, we were going downstairs to get ready to see Ghislaine's townhouse, as he had promised her earlier. I loved taking the hidden staircase while I hated it. Oh, he loved taking the hidden staircase while I hated it. I was so creeped out by his choice of decor, the blood-red carpets, violent medieval paintings, and sculptures of the pagan god Pan, all of it representing the darker side of hedonism his lifestyle provoked. Spiraling down the hallway, along with each step you took, came with a pair of eyes that followed your every step. Brown, blue, green, hazel. All of the colors were there, staring at you the entire way down. As each step progressed, so would anxiety to get out of there. We found Ghislaine where we had left her, in her office. She had just received an order in, a satellite camera with a 12-inch flat screen. She told us how it was used to pick up any person in any location with the quick insert of address. Quite a powerful new toy, I thought, but it was only a minute a minute display of what the rich could afford. What use they could get out of it was another concern. Soon after she was done figuring out the controls on the camera, we made a rare and first for me pit stop, the security room. What I thought was our way out by the front door was another hidden door. I was in shock as I was led into a room so discreet that in 3 years I never even knew it existed. I kept my head down most of the time, knowing how secretive this must be. Being another door was an entire security base within his mansion. What I could see when I stole a glimpse here and there was an array of tiny screens, 20 odd or something. Small screens showing various rooms of the mansion I had recognized. The images were constantly changing, so I found it hard to pinpoint an exact location from the decor. In short glimpses, I suddenly knew from then on that my feelings of my every move being watched inside his corridors was now more than a possibility, but was actually happening. Jeffrey spoke to an obese Spanish guy at the desk, whose job was to disgustingly overlook all of the video feedback. Kill two birds with one stone, Jeffrey thought. Free porn to share with all of his pedophile friends, and when the occasion called for it, a security system, all at one expense. Ever consumed with making money as well as saving it, I was once again astonished at Jeffrey's capabilities. I didn't want to even think how deep the video infiltrated. Pretending like I never saw anything at all, I put the memory to the back of my mind and went on about my day. Stopping at Glenn's new townhouse, another gift was bought and paid for by Jeffrey. Oh, okay, He pointed out needed changes all over the place, driving the builders mad, as always. He wanted the place to scream out Glenn with a bold statement in all caps. Checkered floors and bold colors was the theme, like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. Very well suited, I thought. The dust from the walls being torn down choked my throat, and the elevator was not in use. The stairs were hardly either. The whole house was in bad shape, then having to go up 3 flights of rickety steps was a bit of a risk too, but worth it once you made it to her future walk-in wardrobe, or to us commoners, a closet the size of a small house. Complete with a dressing room, luxurious bathroom, and plenty of storage for her every ensemble. Even without it being furnished, it was already a work of art, a sanctuary for any woman. She adorned herself in her future home, finally her own, relishing every inch of it. She already put in a work desk and spoke constantly of its ongoing renovations. About an hour later, we were off to pick out curtains and look at some paint samples at a couple different boutique-looking shops. Easily passing off as an ordinary couple for the day, they walked arm in arm, strolling the streets of the Upper East Side. Except to me, still replaying the early afternoon's events, shaking my head over the echoed images in my mind. I followed behind, just waiting to be needed again. Over the course of the next few months was a constant influx of exorbitant excursions at Jeffrey's mansions, mainly to his island, to keep up with his ever-demanding sexual appetite with various young women and teenage girls. I got back on the Xanax, an old habit that I felt at the time would stop my memories from flowing back, rehabilitate my problems, and relax me enough to deal with the situation at hand, no matter what the circumstance revealed itself to be. It was a drug that would blind my eyes. It was a drug that would blind my eyes to everything I should have been running from. Having Jean-Luc Brunel always in the picture these days wasn't helping me at all either. Sending his girls for Jeffrey at all of his places now and at a vigorous flow, they had an abundance of girls at their disposal. If I were to count one girl for every day of the week, it would be the underestimated statement of the century. So many girls between the two of them. Some nights it would be a free-for-all frenzy for Jeffrey and Brunel. 7 or so girls giving them their utmost attention, doting on their every moan and whimper. Jeffrey being the main concern, since Brunel worked for him, and we were all aware of that too. If there were heaven on earth for men like Jeffrey, then he would be their god. Every one of his innermost desires was fulfilled when his harem of women was around. No wonder he didn't travel much abroad these days. All he ever wanted was right at his doorstep. I couldn't believe that he was still asking me to bring girls to him as well. There was never enough girls to fill his appetite. So on occasion, I would meet a pretty girl around my age and invite her back to his place to make some quick money by offering her a really good contact in the model and acting business. Keeping him satisfied and in need of me was a tiring job. With so much competition, I had to be on the ball, seeming ambitious to grant him all his desires. It was a lot of pressure and a spotlight of a role to undertake at such a young age. But I told myself this is what my life's training had led me up to be. My birthday was around the corner, and turning 18 had lost all of its sparkle and pizzazz. There were no more surprises in store for me. Nothing that would bedazzle me I hadn't done already. I spent my birthday on the island, having a quiet dinner and watching Sex and the City on the couch with Jeffrey, Glenn, and Emmy. There was no cake or a celebration of any sort, but I did get a couple presents that I opened outside underneath the main cabana. Jeffrey gave me a beautiful pair of sapphire and diamond encrusted earrings, and Ghislaine bought me another designer makeup case. I thanked the two of them with a tight squeeze and a gratuitous short spiel. As it went quiet, I looked out to the ocean and wondered if across these waters there was ever going to be happier days spent with someone special to me. Would he be kind, compassionate, and always be there when I needed him most? Or would I end up settling for my final bit of training? A marriage to a greedy old Scrooge. Either way, what I wanted most didn't matter right now. I was still bound by Jeffrey's hold over me, and all I had to keep telling myself to get through this epic journey was, this is the way it was for now. Around the table for breakfast, Jeffrey announced that he was expecting a few guests coming over with Brunel. No one of importance, just his usual entourage of beautiful girls. Russian models this time. And Jeffrey was also having a photographer flown in to take modeling photos using the island as the perfect background for a sexy shoot. All of us girls were ushered onto rocks, hammocks, dug into sand, and displayed just about anywhere they wanted. We were being photographed in next to nothing, like a netted fabric placed over us if the shot called for it. But the more provocative, the more Jeffrey and Brunel loved it. After the photo shoot, we did some outdoor water sports. While us girls raced the jet skis around and jumped on the water trampoline, the men stayed on dry land to watch us from the beach. I was so used to this constant charade of girls, and I didn't mind having a bit of fun. But this was different. I had to be more than just polite, because I already knew it wouldn't be long before we were all intimate with each other as well. Being the only girl that spoke English out of all of them was also a huge blunder. The only way we could communicate was through hand gestures and body language, a very primitive form of speaking. But what choice did we have? I did my best to get acquainted, as I had previously assumed. After lunch on the beach, we were again ushered into another part of the island, Jeffrey's cabana. There was no need for words here, as the girls already knew exactly what to do. Without saying anything, they undressed me and began to ravage my body with their hands, tongues, lips, and fingers. I was delirious, never having done anything like this before with so many girls. It was sheer chaos. I don't honestly know how men could fantasize over this. Through the glimpses in between bodies crossing over me, I could see Jeffrey and Brunel watching us, sitting in a chair with their hands around their penises, stroking themselves together. The best part is they don't even speak English, so there's never a need to have to keep them amused. I could hear one of the men divulge, and pretty sure it came from Jeffrey laughing out loud to Brunel. I just closed my eyes and went somewhere else in my mind until it was all over. That was that. Life went on, and we all moved on to eat dinner together. They couldn't be more awkward, as Jeffrey and Brunel were beside themselves with their egos beaming. And the girls chatted like busy little chipmunks with each other. Ghislaine and Emmy on the other end of the table were being mused at the entire racket around the table. And then there was me, sitting quietly and smiling in people's directions when needed. I was counting down the minutes until I could go lay down in my giant comfortable bed, slipping away to the gentle noises the island created, and sink comfortably into a deep sleep with the assistance of my Xanax. Scratching at the plate in front of me with my fork out of boredom, I wasn't even hungry. I lost my appetite for food. Rather than sipping on the champagne, I wanted to feel as far away from here as possible. What seemed like hours for everyone to finish their meals, we were finally all saying goodnight and goodbye to each other, as Brunel was off early in the morning and taking the 8 beauties with him. Thank God, I told myself. Once was more than I could handle of that in one day. It didn't take me long to get back into my own comfort zone. Heading straight back to my cabana after dessert was served, nearly tripping over my own 2 feet as I tried to scuttle off in a hurry. As soon as I entered my domain, I drew a breath and sighed a deep exhale outwards, finally alone and at peace, for now at least. Although the sun had set hours ago, the high temperatures of the Caribbean were still an affliction. Plaguing my cabana, I was welcomed by a rush of warm air as I opened the door. I hit the switch to the fan and stripped down for a shower. Preparing my towel and toiletries, I opened the back door to the outside shower and placed them on the floor. Whether I was cleaning up in the midst of a hot day or retiring from the evening, an outside shower was always splendid. Under a thick dark cloak of the night sky, only the moon and stars to shed enough light for me to see my way around. I could feel the soft breeze lick the droplets falling off my body's curves in the reflection of the moonlight. It only encouraged me to stay longer on the warmth from the spray of rushing water. I let the hot water run out before I was sufficed enough to go back inside. Lounging around the bed in my panties and tank top, I was still sweltering from the heat. Trying to tire myself out, I did some reading and eventually fell asleep. I needed those times to unwind after such an ordeal. Letting the Xanax wash away all of the pain, I could then forgive the mistakes I had made. Blaming myself for staying around for this, I had wished I was never born at all. The pills would take all of that away for me. My heart was a tangled weave of deception and pain, only reassured by the lies that were told to me, and the lies I would have to convince myself of. End of chapter 15. Okay, I am going to go eat some dinner, and we will be back later tonight. If you guys enjoyed this stream and you like the dictation, please feel free to subscribe if you like. It is free to do so. You can hit that like button too if you so desire. And if you really want to support the channel, please do feel free to give me a donation to PayPal or GoFundMe, or to subscribe to a Patreon for as little as $1, or a Subscribe Star as well. Just gonna go over the comments. Looks like you guys had quite a lot to say. So hope you guys enjoyed that, as I said before, and I will go to chapter 16 on my next live stream. Cheers. All the best from the Midwest. And until next time, people, stay frosty.